Welcome back to The Daily Poem here on the Close Reads Podcast Network. I'm David Kern, and today is Wednesday, May 27th, 2020. It's garden week. It's garden theme week here on The Daily Poem with the passing of Memorial Day on Monday. Summer is ostensibly here. So this week I wanted to read 4 poems that have that theme of gardening. So yesterday I read Andrew Marvell's The Garden. And today it's a poem by W.H. Auden. Auden lived from 1907 to 1973. He was a British-American poet, I suppose, and is quite famous, of course, for poems like The Shield of Achilles, and September 1, 1939, Funeral Blues, a number of other poems. He won the Pulitzer Prize for Poetry for his 1947 poem, The Age of Anxiety, which was a long poem. And he also was a professor of poetry at Oxford, among other positions. You've heard from him before on this podcast, and the poem that I'm going to read today is called Their Lonely Bedders. I want to shout out Alan Jacobs again on his Monday morning email that he sends out every now and then. He mentioned this poem and the Andrew Marvell poem as great poems for this time of the year. And so I wanted to remind you that you can go check his newsletter out. It is called Snakes and Ladders. If you Google Alan Jacobs Snakes and Ladders, you'll come across his website where you can find that. There's lots of great content in there about culture and the news even, and music and painting and gardening and things like that. So it's a great little newsletter to get in your inbox every couple of weeks. Highly recommend it. So I wanted to thank him for reminding me of this poem and make sure that I shouted him out a little bit. So here is W.H. Auden's Their Lonely Bedders. As I listened from a beach chair in the shade to all the noises that my garden made, it seemed to me only proper that words should be withheld from vegetables and birds. A robin, with no Christian name, ran through the robin anthem, which was all it knew, and rustling flowers for some third party waited to say which pairs, if any, should get mated. None of them was capable of lying. There was not one which knew that it was dying, or could have, with a rhythm or a rhyme, assumed responsibility for time. Let them leave language to their lonely bedders, who count some days and long for certain letters. We too make noises when we laugh or weep. Words are for those with promises to keep. Auden is one of those poets who makes it look so easy, makes it seem like it comes with such little effort. That's what I always think of when I read his work. I mean, I know it doesn't. I know he put great effort into it, and he attended very closely to what he was writing, paid very close attention to the forms and the rhythms, and every word was probably carefully considered, slaved over, if you will. But there's a sort of pacing and a rhythm that the great poets have that makes the words roll off the tongue for the reader. And when they're rolling along, when they're rolling off the tongue, it makes it feel so fluid, so much like it must have been inspired, like it just came. And I'm sure certain lines did, but the way he can fit different lines and ideas and images all together into this comprehensive, complete whole is really magical. I mean, I think there is a magic in experiencing the work of great poets. This is not I wouldn't say this is one of Auden's best poems even, but that fluidity is certainly there. He can be consistent with his rhyming couplets without the rhyming becoming too sing-songy, without losing control of it, without it being so dominant that it overwhelms the poem. And I've read that this poem was influenced by Frost, which of course you see Frost in that final phrase, promises to keep, which, that's from a famous Frost poem as well, or shows up in a famous Frost poem. I don't want to attribute the phrase to Frost because I don't know that he invented it. But in that final phrase with promises to keep, words are for those with promises to keep is the line. We see Frost, but we also see Frost in this fluidity. But I think where we really see the Frostian influence, if you will, is in the way the turn happens at the end of the poem. So we think we're getting, one sort of poem, but if you know Frost, or you know Auden's work, you know that there's going to be a turn, maybe not a reversal, but certainly a change in theme. We're going to be thinking about something completely different at the end than we were at the beginning, and all the images we've been given are going to be fulfilled in the final contemplation. In fact, it's really interesting to me the way that different people respond to this poem, because for some people the ending is very positive. Language empowers us, those people would say, in a way that it does not the birds. It makes our sense of communication, our ability to communicate, more comprehensive. While for others, this ability to communicate can lead to darker, sadder results. I've read that this is one of those poems that is about agency, I think is the word that I've read, being taken out of human hands by language, which I think is an interesting concept that I'm not sure that I totally agree with, but is worth thinking about. Frost once said that one of his very famous poems was tricky, because it wasn't necessarily what everybody thought it was in terms of its meaning, in terms of what it was implying. And I wonder if Auden was kind of going after similar things in his poetry, where there's what it seems to say on the surface, and then there's what it's saying in the subtext, what it's saying underneath all the images, and what it's saying in the relationships, the specific relationships between the images and the way the images are presented, the language the image is presented in. So this is a poem about language, about the complication of language, written in language, of course. And that would not have been lost on Auden, and it's something worth thinking about as you contemplate this poem a little more. I have just a few minutes to contemplate it here, so I can't get into that too deeply, but it's worth thinking about. So once more, here is Auden's Their Lonely Betters. As I listened from a beach chair in the shade to all the noises that my garden made, it seemed to me only proper that words should be withheld from vegetables and birds. A robin with no Christian name ran through the robin anthem, which was all it knew, and rustling flowers for some third party waited to say which pairs, if any, should get mated. Not one of them was capable of lying. There was not one which knew that it was dying, or could have, with a rhythm or a rhyme, assumed responsibility for time. Let them leave language to their lonely betters, who count some days and long for certain letters. We too make noises when we laugh or weep. Words are for those with promises to keep. This has been the Daily Poem. Thanks so much for listening. I'll be back tomorrow with another poem for you.